and on as they like. We have 24 so far. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Contemporary Issues class on August 9. Hope you had a good week. It's a beautiful day today. I want to welcome any first-timers we have. Today, we've got a few people that are signing up, finding us on the church website, and so we welcome them. I'm Steve Baska, our class leader, and we are recording this today for replay in the future for those who cannot be with us. I want to remind you to mute yourself, please, in the lower left corner of your screen when you're not talking so we don't hear the background noise. And if you are not able to do that, I can mute you on my settings here too. Okay, today we are going to have a presentation about Joe Biden, the assumed Democratic presidential nominee, by Ron Puening, our classmate and frequent presenter. He's going to do a biography of Joe Biden. And I want to preface this, of course, by saying we are not endorsing Joe Biden today in this class or in our church. We can't do that and don't want to do that. But we are trying to learn more about him. And in 2 weeks, I'm going to do a presentation, similar presentation on Donald Trump. So we can learn a little about their backgrounds and their positions. And we're going to have a chance to talk about the pros and the cons of each of them and hopefully learn more about them. And let's see, let's do other announcements before we get started. I've got a couple announcements about St. Andrew, about the church, and let me go ahead and mute a couple people here. Okay, my announcements about the church is that the church task force, COVID task force, met a few days ago and announced that the church is not going to be open. They're not predicting when it's going to be open in person, that they are starting this week with the preschool, having the kids come in preschool and complying with state regulations on that. And then they're going to see how that goes, if they will open it to small groups in the church. But in the meantime, they are allowing outside on the parking lot and the Labyrinth area, small groups to meet, and you can make reservations through Sarah Davis, the administrative assistant at the church. And so that's the current state of St. Andrew. I haven't seen much publicity on that, so I wanted to let you know what they've been emailing to me. So, for example, my men's covenant group is going to meet there on Tuesday under the outdoor worship area under the fellowship hall outside, and other groups will start doing that too with masks on and some other requirements. So that's the only announcement I had. Anybody else want to give announcements or share something that you've been doing or
you look pretty awesome with your longer hair? I gotta say, your hair's getting longer. You look like a rock star. It's totally awesome.
Thank you, Bob.
I love it.
We like it a lot.
I think it's awesome.
Thank you. Just giving it a try. Something different. We'll see. Bob, have you been doing your music at the hospitals?
He's asking you.
Oh, no, I have not been doing it recently. So we'll see if it's, as it starts going further and further, if it starts increasing, yeah. I'll be there for him. But
we also found that our place where he would play at, they closed that street because UC is building another tower. So we have to find a new spot.
I had to find a new hospital because that one was so perfect because the parking garage they all parked in, they went over the walkway there. Now it's all
got it in my ears.
Bob was playing
entrances, you know what I mean?
Bob was playing his trumpet in front of a hospital for the healthcare workers and was on TV too. Got some coverage for that. So we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, we will get into our topic today. And Ron, are you going to do usual format of about 15 minutes and then take a little break for discussion?
Yeah, what we'll do
Can't you
is
hear there?
we will look at the biographical background of the candidate and then look at his positions on some of the major issues.
Okay. And so you'll have discussion in the middle and at the end?
Probably, yeah. The first 15 minutes will be most of the biographical material. Then we'll get into, some discussion.
Okay, sounds good. And I just want to remind everybody to, when you speak, to unmute yourself, talk up loud so we can hear you, and be kind in your comments toward other people and even toward Mr. Biden today, to reflect that we are in a church setting. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, Ron, thank you.
Okay.
I request this, though. I want to request this. I have to, because there always seems to be people that don't mute themselves, and it's very distracting. So I request that Steve, please manage that and get in there and keep, even if you have to keep muting them, because
do that, Bob.
Really hear Ron's talk.
I'm doing that, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
you bet. Thank you. Ron, go ahead.
Okay. I'm a big fan of the great courses, and I think some other members of the class, I know Steve, you enjoy great courses, and several other members do too. But one of my all-time favorites is The Basis of Personality. I love that course because it tells us to dig deep, look into our lives and what constitutes our personality. It helps all of us to identify where we have strengths, where we have weaknesses, and some of the biases, some of the characteristics we have.
Is great for me.
So I think one of the things I like about looking at some of the candidates, it pays to look a little bit into their background. It helps give us a feel for why they've turned into the person they are, and some of the foundational bases of their positions and issues. So today we're looking at Joe Biden, former senator of Delaware. That's a picture of Joe recently with his second wife, Jill. And he looks a lot like Jerry Mathers, the beaver, there at age 10.
Ron, I'm not seeing your picture on the screen. Did you hit share screen?
Let's see what happens. You should be. Hold on, let me end show. And let me get back to Facebook, share. How about, okay, there we go.
There, it's coming up now. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, it's on screen.
From current slide. Okay, I'm gonna go back one. There we go. Okay, ready to roll. There's a lot of books out there about Joe. The one on the left there, No Ordinary Joe, is probably one of the better overall summaries. If you want a quick summary of his life and political positions, that one on the left there is probably the best. The one in the middle is a book he originally authored back in about 2008. It has a lot of fine detail and a tremendous amount of history about his political dealings. And then the book on the right has just come out in the last few months. It's a book by his wife, Jill, and I'm still listening to that on audiobook. She makes some good endpoints, whatever. Okay, Joe was born in, let's call him a World War II baby, November 1942. First oldest child of a Catholic couple. Joe Biden Jr. was his dad, and Catherine Finnegan, there's an Irish name. So as you might guess, his father's heritage was predominantly English. His mom's Irish. And Joe's dad worked for his grandfather, and during World War II, made sealants for merchant marine ships they were making for the war. The business largely went away after the war, and his dad had quite a few job changes and had to work pretty hard to keep employed. Joe Biden's dad often told him the measure of a man is not how often he gets knocked down, but how quickly he gets up. And Joe's had to do a lot of that in his life. Again, he was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. There's a little map of Pennsylvania out to the side here. And Allentown and Scranton are in far eastern Pennsylvania. And so again, Joe was born in Scranton. Billy Joel sang the song, "I'm Living Here in Allentown." Allentown was hit hard by steel mill closures, as was Scranton for that matter. So they're old, sort of Rust Belt, smaller towns in eastern Pennsylvania. And Joe ended up at about, when he was 10 years old, his dad, to get better employment opportunities, moved him down the state. I say down the state. We traveled down from Scranton, past Philadelphia, and we get into the tiny state of Delaware. And it is a small state, both in terms of population and people. So again, he had his first 10 years in Pennsylvania, Scranton, big Catholic family, Catholic parish area, and then moved down to Delaware when he was 10. Joe's mom, again, had the Irish name of Finnegan, and she always installed in him egalitarian precepts, which means it's basically the thought that everybody's equal. Nobody should put themselves up on a pedestal and think that they're better or royalty than somebody else. His mom was very strong at that. A few pictures of Joe. Again, he's the oldest of at least 4. So he's got younger brothers Jimmy and Frank, and his younger sister Valerie, who did and still does play a major role in his life. Here's some early pictures. There's his Grandpa Finnegan, so that's his mom's father, that's his grandpa. And then here's a picture of the kids. That's his sister Val at her first communion. There's Joe, and there's his younger brother Jimmy. So big Catholic family. I'm going to title this one, Never Anger an Irish Mom. Joe did have a stutter, a speech impediment that he's dealt with certainly more in his early years. But in 7th grade in a Catholic school, the nun, who was the teacher, made fun of him in front of the class. She called him Mr. Biden, imitating his stutter. And he was very upset, as a kid would when you're put on the spot and made fun of for your handicap in front of others. And he came home and told his mom. She went back and spoke to the nun. And you can see the quote, "If you ever speak to my son again like that, I'll come back and rip the bonnet off your head." Okay, so he said he learned from his mom, you respect the hobbit, the vestments, the uniform, but you don't have to respect the person in it. He said everybody has to earn respect. They can't just collect some institutionalized respect and earn their reputation that way. All of us have to be judged by the, as Martin Luther King would say, the content of our character. So again, in his early years, he was affected with a stutter. His uncle Boo Boo also had it, not to be confused with Yogi Bear's friend. But he was excused from having to give speeches in early high school. And he went to speech therapy, practiced elocution, speaking with marbles in his mouth in front of a mirror and all that kind of stuff. And he was able to overcome the stutter and at least deliver the welcome address at the high school graduation. He had average grades and excelled at football. And the coach said he was the most talented pass receiver he ever had. Here's a picture of Joe as a lifeguard. So he was quite athletic and quite a handsome young man. College years. He obviously was fairly popular. He was elected president of the college freshman class in 1961 at the University of Delaware. And he was majoring in political science and history. So he had an interest in politics from an early going, and also an interest in pursuing law. So there's a picture of him in his 1965 yearbook. He was known in college, they say, as being pretty straight. He was a teetotaler. He didn't smoke. He rarely, if ever, drank. So he was not one to be the Animal House party leader in college. He was a very straight-laced guy. And you can see that by his haircut. I know his second wife, Jill, in her book said that she had dated a couple guys that had, you know, a little longer hair at that time. And here he was, more of a straight-looking person. He met his first wife, Nelia, on spring break in the Bahamas. He kind of snuck into a party, crashed the party, and was enamored by Nelia. Ended up asking her for a date, and so what do you know? He ended up going steady with her, and then ended up with a relationship with her in college, and then going on to Syracuse University. The choice to go there was influenced by a college that was near where she was going to school. So ladies have an impact on our life. There's a picture of his first wife, Nelia, and there's a picture. He had two boys. He of course married Nelia. In fact, he married her right after he got out of college and started law school, and ended up having two boys with her pretty soon. There's a picture of them cutting a birthday cake. All right, so he got started. Again, he married Nelia after his first year of law school, and the couple lived in Syracuse. He had a pretty influential father-in-law. Nelia's family was not down and out, and his dad ended up getting him a contact at a big law firm when he graduated from law school, and got him in with that law firm. He worked at that law firm about a year, but he said it didn't fit his basic orientation. The firm was very much a big business and defensive big business firm, and he had a good, pretty much streak of helping the common people. So he ended up actually leaving that law firm, and he gives the story of why in the book Promises to Keep. But he ended up taking a job as a public defender with a lot of 90% of the clients that he took care of as a public defender were African Americans. That certainly gave him an insight into the Black community, and showed that he had the, shall we call it, the classical large Catholic family, small Pennsylvania town, Union Democrat kind of orientation from his family. Okay, start in politics. He'd always wanted to be in politics. Nelia knew it, and he started off in Delaware, running for the Newcastle County Council. Now that's hardly a big political position, but nonetheless, he worked hard. His sister Val, his younger sister Val, was his campaign manager. And they went door to door, and they stressed the issues important to voters: crime, refuge collection, overdevelopment. And he won that race for the Newcastle County, Delaware Council. Again, hardly a big political position, by about 2,000 votes. And it was surprising because it was in what is considered a very Republican district in Delaware. So that started his political career. Also, let's see, Richard Nixon was president at that time, and Nixon was just starting to sow the seeds of Nixon's demise. Okay, again, his sister Valerie. Valerie's led every campaign in his political career, and she was one of the first women to head up a senatorial campaign and a presidential campaign. I think she's way up in the Biden campaign right now, but she's quite the gal and quite a fan and undergirder of Big Brother Joe. And she's a graduate of the University of Delaware, married to Jack Owens, attorney and businessman, and she's vice chair of the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware. So we'll see her probably in the current campaign some. She's a big part of his life. With his second wife, daughter Ashley, we'll probably also see her. She married in 2012 to Dr. Howard Krein, a social worker, and is very much a social justice advocate. So we'll probably see some influence of her on Joe, and she'll probably play a small role, at least, if he wins the presidency. Okay. After just a couple years on the Delaware County Council, again, that's hardly, he decided to run for the Delaware Senate. And where else but in Delaware can you take a small amount of cash and go door to door and compete for a Senate seat? His first opponent was a very, really, it sounds like a great guy. He was well respected. Senator James Boggs. He was a decorated World War II veteran, seemed to have pretty good positions on things, but it was suspected he was just kind of tired and worn out. Thought he had the election in the bag, and Joe went out like a firebrand and went all over the state and talked and campaigned, collected money, and pulled off one of the biggest upsets ever, and ended up winning the Senate seat. So Joe was on a very high note there in November, but again, it was November of 1972 that he won the Senate seat. He had had a daughter born with his first wife in 1971, so he's now got 3 children as he's just won his Senate seat. And then came the biggest tragedy of his life. Monday, December 18th, 1972, Naomi, his first wife, put all the kids in the car, the 2 boys and the little 1-year-old girl, and they went off to shop for a Christmas tree. And it looks like she pulled out in front of a truck coming down a hill. There's a picture of the car, and the car slammed broadside into the station wagon, crushed her and the little child, and the 2 boys were badly injured. They ended up in the hospital for a couple months. He was in Washington hiring staff, he said, and got a phone call, and he got the word that his wife and his daughter had been killed. And he clearly says this was the toughest thing that ever happened to him, and we would wish this misfortune on no one. What a tragedy and what a blow to anyone's life. So he went from on top of the world in November, having won the Senate seat, to the depths of despair in December, a month later, with the loss of his wife. And he said it was really tough. He said, no words, no prayer, no sermon gave me ease. I felt God had played a horrible trick on me, and I was angry. I found no comfort in the church. He spent many days in the hospital with his sons, and he was actually sworn in as a new senator there at the hospital. There's a picture of him being sworn into the Senate in a Wilmington hospital with his one of his 2 little boys still in recovery. One of his boys had to be put in nearly a full body cast. So tough time, and he learned a lot from that. Not the way we'd like to learn now. So he then was one of the youngest senators ever. The law says you've got to be 30 years old to be sworn in as a senator. He actually won the election when he was 29, but he turned 30 before the swearing in. So he became one of the youngest senators in the United States. Early committee positions, he worked on public works, banking, housing, and urban affairs. So he's been given a very broad look at a lot of important things. And he would go on to serve 6 full terms in the Senate. The Senate term, of course, is 6 years. And he would serve as chair of the U.S. Senate Committee on Judiciary from 81 to 87, and then he returned as chairman from 95 to 97. And he also served on the U.S. Senate Committee called Foreign Relations, which is really important to give you an undergirding for understanding the place of the United States in the world and its diplomacy. I would have to say you probably want in every administration somebody that's had some experience on the Foreign Relations Committee, somebody that's been Secretary of State, and somebody that's maybe served in the United Nations and has at least some undergirded understanding of national affairs and the world. Okay, so not too long after his first wife died, he met his wife to be Jill. He met her in 1975, so this is a couple years after the horrible tragedy. And Jill tells some pretty interesting stories in her book. It's worth listening to. It's a nice personal account. And he ended up proposing to Jill and marrying her about 4.5 years after losing his first wife. She notes that he had proposed to her at least 5 times before she finally accepted. It took her quite a while to take on the responsibility of being a stepmom for 2 boys. And
she was also divorced.
Yeah, she had also had a 1-year marriage when she was age 18, right in her freshman year of college. So she was recovering from that divorce experience. But at any rate, the story does have a happy ending. They did get married, and Jill went on to become stepmom for the 2 boys. They had a child of their own, whose picture we saw, a little girl, Ashley, who's still a prominent figure in their lives. And Jill is no dummy. She's got a PhD. She's got at least 2 master's degrees, and she teaches at a college in Virginia near Washington, D.C. And she commutes down to that college to teach. So she's a very educated woman, very capable, very independent. And again, she did step in, become a stepmom, and then also have a child with Joe. There's a picture of Jill. She was an English and writing instructor at the University of Delaware. She also taught adolescents with emotional disabilities at a psychiatric hospital, 13 years experience teaching in public schools, president of the Biden Breast Health Initiative and Book Buddies, which is a program for low-income kids. And wow, get a load of that. Runs 5 miles 5 times a week and has run the Marine Corps Marathon.
Wow.
Yeah, so yeah, she's quite the lady. She's not incapable by any means. Another thing we should know about Joe, he had two aneurysms way back in 1988. He had a short run for the presidency of the Democrat, at least to become the Democratic candidate in 1988. And he was in a motel room, and he went unconscious, woke up hours later. They took him to a hospital, did a spinal tap, and finally found that he had blood in his spinal fluid. And this is a really dangerous condition. And they did some brain scans and found out he had 2 aneurysms, one more severe than the other, and they needed to operate. They did operate. He was told that each of the surgeries had about a 10% chance of killing you, and even a higher chance of giving you some mental damage. And it was so dangerous that they had a priest give Joe last rites prior to these surgeries, just in case. And he missed 7 months in the Senate, but he did return to the Senate in the fall of 1988. And so he's that was more than, what, almost 30 years ago? So it proves you can recover from a brain aneurysm. As a member of the Colorado Mountain Club, I was chatting with a lady who was on one of our bike hikes. She told me she had a brain aneurysm and went to the University of North Carolina get treated by the specialist there. And to treat her brain aneurysm, they had to actually cut out a section of blood vessel in her brain and stretch the veins and splice them together. And she says she writes a thank you letter to the surgeon every year and has for the last 20 years. So you might say he's had a breach with death in some respects because of this very serious health condition. So coupled with the loss of his first wife and infant daughter, the two aneurysms, and then he had another tragedy happen. I don't know who knows about it in the class, probably most of you. His oldest of the two boys, Bo, was the Delaware Attorney General and an Army National Guard major. A handsome guy. There's a picture of Bo with his then wife, along with Joe and Jill. And he came down with brain cancer. And Bo was considered maybe the most politically promising son of Joe. He died back in 2015 at the young age of 46 of brain cancer. And Joe definitely says it was probably the major factor in Joe's not deciding to seek the presidency in 2016. Joe recently wrote the book, Promise Me Dad, and there's a little quote from it. Promise me, Dad, Bo told his father, give me your word that no matter what happens, you're going to be all right. So Joe pretty much told him, don't drop out of life, even if I die of this brain cancer, hang in there, keep going, and even seek the presidency later if you want. So it turns out that's what is happening right now. Here's another book on Joe Biden. He was, of course, chosen by Barack Obama to be his vice presidency. And there were probably several reasons, but one of the key reasons was that Joe had significant experience in foreign policy on the Foreign Relations Committee, 6 terms in the Senate, had some international travel, had talked and met with foreign leaders. He knew a good bit about national security, and he had the courage to speak frankly and disagree. If you read the books, there were some cases where he disagreed with Barack Obama and would give him his open and fair opinion on that. For those of you who have read the book Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, Doris was mentioned last week in Harvey's presentation. Doris, of course, also wrote the books on several of the presidents, and her latest book was The Basic Traits of Leadership. I've reworded that title of the book, but that's the basic part of it. And in her book, she talked about the key things that she saw as being important for a leader. And Barack Obama appreciated Joe being able to speak frankly and not be a yes man that just said yes to whatever he said. Okay, so there's the basic biographical background. We're now going to launch into Joe's position on a series of things, but now's a good time to stop for at least a first thing and see if anybody has any questions on this basic biographical sketch before we launch into his basic positions on 10 major issues. Any questions out there?
I'm sure there's a lot of questions, Ron, and I'll throw out the first one if I can. How about Joe's mental fitness? Everybody questions it. Excuse me. And Joe has declined to take the mental fitness test that Trump talks about that he's done so well on. What do you think about that? Do you think that Joe should, and do you think he's mentally okay to serve 4 years?
Okay, well, my opinion, I've heard him speak on TV, and true. He's not as sharp at age 77 or 78 that he was at age, say, 48. But I think he's got the mental acuity. And I guess I have to say, you know, I turn age 69 here in a month, and well, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Maybe never was, but yeah, I think, okay, so if he takes a little longer to delineate his positions, I think he's still got the sharpness and the strength of judgment to be a good leader.
Well, you know, there is the concepts of crystallized intelligence versus fluid intelligence. Fluid, which is more transitory and certainly impacted more by the aging experience, but crystallized is based on years of experience in problem solving and complexities of life, certainly a familiar territory in the realm of politics. So where you may be deficient in one, you can also be quite strong in the other. Is that a fair statement, Ron?
Yeah, I think overall you could say about Joe is he's a moderate by any means. And I think that position sort of came out in the Democratic debates. So he's not far left, certainly isn't far right. He's a centrist. And I think maybe that's what America's looking for right now to some extent. Okay, so on the economy, yeah, any other questions out there on the biographical sketch?
Could I make a comment?
Fire, yeah.
Yeah, I took an Ollie class on current events and a Zoom class recently. And a lot of the people on that class, the topic that day was, who would Joe Biden put around him in his cabinet if he were elected? And it was a real, very informative discussion of how he chooses people to be in his cabinet that are very qualified. And I found that if I could find that recording, I'll pass it on to you, Steve, because it was very helpful. It was about a 2-hour discussion on people that he would surround himself with had he been elected, if he's elected.
Thank you.
All right. On the economy, things are moving fast, and the COVID situation certainly creates an all-new world. But he has proposed increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, and also proposes allowing workers to take paid sick leave for a family member. On taxation, he basically feels like, yes, there should be some increased taxes on corporations and the wealthy. He feels there should be a 15% minimum tax on corporations who have more than 100 million in net profits, and raising the tax rate on those earning more than $500,000 a year by 2.5–3%. Also increasing capital gains tax on people with over $1 million in income. So any comments on the economy and taxation issues? Okay, immigration. He does feel that we do need to maintain criminal penalties for illegal immigration. And he has advocated finding ways to extend citizenship to dreamers. So I think he's got a fairly central position on the issue of immigration. Healthcare. This is one of the issues that sets him apart from at least some of the Democratic candidates. He believes an incremental healthcare reform is what we need, and we should build on the Affordable Care Act. I remember Amy Klobuchar saying in the debates that the universal health care couldn't right now get even a majority among just the Democratic senators. So I think he's pragmatic here and realizes that incremental health care reform is probably what you can carry and pass with the current political environment. He has noted that people in other developed countries are spending much less on drugs than Americans, the same drugs, and he wants to set up an independent board to analyze, possibly set some ceilings on drug prices. So any comment on his position on healthcare? Education. He certainly has, if Jill becomes the first lady, he certainly has an educational advocate by his side. He certainly wants pay raises for teachers, 2 years of free community college or tech school. So that's not a total free ride for everybody all the way, but it's a pretty good start to give everybody potentially 2 years of community college or tech school. He proposes some curbs on charter schools, such as those that would operate for profit, and doesn't propose to wipe out all college loans, but rather to simplify the public service loan protection program. So he's got, I think, a centrist position on education. Any comments out there?
Ron, will that be a lot of money to pay 2 years of community college and tech school?
I'm sorry, where will the money come from?
Yeah, is it a big amount?
I'd have to do a little research. I'm sure it's not a trivial amount. On the other side of the coin, if you look back in American history to the GI Bill, it basically gave nearly a free ride to all the GIs coming back from World War II. So yes, it would have a financial impact. I think the tax increases on those over $500,000 and those and corporations who are not paying any taxes could make up most of this. Does anybody recognize the picture down there on the screen?
Animal House.
Yeah, okay.
What's public service loan protection program?
Again,
What is that?
there's a loan protection program that deals with college loans and how you consolidate them and what you have to pay back and protection. And he wants to simplify that and make it a little better. Criminal justice. He does believe in abolishing the death penalty, not having private companies run prisons, ending cash bail, providing extra funding to states to prioritize prevention over imprisonment, letting states legalize marijuana, removing prior marijuana offenses from records, and reforming the mandatory minimum sentence guidelines. Okay, any comments on that? Gun control. He does own a gun. In 1994, he was one of the key sponsors of a bill to ban assault weapons for a 10-year period. When this came up for renewal in 2004, it was not renewed. So assault weapons are now allowed, but he did work on banning them back in 1994. His current position, he proposes further bans on assault weapons as part of this crime bill, establishment of a national firearms registry, and universal background checks for people seeking to buy guns. Okay, environment and agriculture. He acknowledges that there's the big word, anthropogenic climate change is occurring. That means humans are influencing the climate. He acknowledges this and is committed to fight it. In other words, do things to try to combat climate change, not pretend it doesn't exist. He does support nuclear power as a tool for clean energy. And having worked in the nuclear industry, I kind of smile at that one. I'm happy with that. He advocates a carbon tax. He's not in favor of allowing new exploitation of oil and gas on federal lands. Proposes to increase protection of small and medium farming enterprises from giant agribusiness by increasing the effectiveness and enforcement of current laws, and proposes expanding protections for farm workers. Any comments? There's a lot of, to some extent right now, the COVID situation is really throwing a wrench in all the gears. The fact that so many state governments and even local school districts are in such serious financial straits, it's going to make whoever's elected president for these next 4 years is kind of getting having the captaincy of the Titanic handed over to him. It's going to be a tough situation to step into.
Ron, I just wanted to say, I think it's great what you've done here, because you said he's a moderate, and then you're going down each area and just really stating it, saying, it's pretty clear then by these slides he is a moderate. I mean, by his beliefs there. So I applaud you in your presentation here so far, that it's you really depicted, I think, his beliefs. It's wow.
Yeah.
Ron, I have a quick question in terms of renewable energy. Does he have any positions in that area?
Yes, he does support the green energies.
Okay.
Okay. Transport, he does feel like we need to put more money into infrastructure. And particularly, he said we need to try to see if we can find some ways to take the infrastructure money and help the poor areas, particularly, to create jobs and help combat climate change. In 1959, when the interstate highway system really kicked in terms of construction, several experts said, if you want to see where the United States is going to grow in the next 100 years, just look at the map of our interstate highway system. And where you see interstates is where you will see potential for economic growth. If your town or area is far away from the interstate, you're at a huge disadvantage relative to economic development. So again, he does say that we need to look at our infrastructure investment, see if we can find ways to get better highway and transport capabilities into some of the poor areas to help them grow better. And the plans would be funded by increasing taxes on the wealthy and reductions in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry.
Ron, I don't want to rush you too much, but we're at 11:19. If you want to leave 10 minutes.
That's pretty much it. He's pretty much in favor of military spending. He's not proposing big military funding cuts. And trade, he's critical of Trump's use of tariffs to wage trade wars, arguing they do more damage to us than to China. And he did criticize China in the Democratic debates relative to their stealing American intellectual property and breaking trade rules. He did give qualified approval to the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Okay, so let's throw it out there for more questions.
Ron, question. Thank you so much. So very helpful. A little more information on DACA and the Dreamers and Joe's position on that very contentious issue. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'll have to dig deeper. All I know is he supports our putting together a fair, reasonable and liberal package to figure out how to deal with the Dreamers. So it does support a Dreamers package. I don't have the fine detail.
You haven't talked about his attitudes about foreign policy. What's concerned me about Biden was his support of the Iraq War. I think that was a wrong decision.
Actually, he was one of the ones that advised Obama against taking some more prominent military positions. I'll have to look and see how he actually voted for I guess I'll have to see how his vote was on the Iraq War. But he's not been a hawk on the Middle East. He has been critical of our overextending ourselves there.
Ron, quick question, please. What did you think about his son, Hunter Biden's, being on that Ukraine energy board? It looked like a conflict of interest while his dad was vice president and dealing with Ukraine. Looked like a judgment on Joe's part.
Okay. I think if we look at the Biden family and the Trump family and most other prominent American political families like the Bushes or the Kennedys, I think we will see significant numbers of the family members leveraging their family connections for opening up business doors and stuff. That's certainly true of almost all the Trump family members. It's true of several of the members of the Biden family who have used their name recognition capability to get positions that they otherwise wouldn't get. So I think this is an American issue. And I think everybody does it. If I was the son of John Elway or Peyton Manning, it does open doors. Let's not kid ourselves.
A lot of people say that Joe should have shown better judgment than to give his son free rides on his plane and to allow him to do business in the same country where Joe was doing business for the government.
Certainly, Hunter did take advantage of the Biden name. I think when you have if your brother or your cousin or your dad is a high position person, you gain an ear. In fact, Congress has had this problem with people leaving Congress to immediately take lobbyist positions. Why do they take these lobbyist positions? They take these positions because they can make big money and open doors that other people can't open. So Hunter, did take advantage of the family name, but whether it's wrong or not, we can argue about that.
Interesting, Ron. Harry Truman's daughter got more attention as a singer by virtue of having the Truman name. That launched her career too.
Yeah.
Just a case in point.
Right.
Question, and Ron, I don't want to be seen because I'm still in my pajamas.
Okay.
But Ron, where did you get this? What's the basis for these slides? Where did you get the information?
Okay. A good bit of it has come from the book No Ordinary Joe, The Life and Career of Joe Biden. There's an appendix at the back of that book, and that book was published just a few months ago that does consolidate and give summaries of Joe's positions on most of the major issues. So again, the book is called No Ordinary Joe, Life and Career of Joe Biden by David Hagan. That's not the only source, but that's maybe the best single source to find his positions.
Who's the author?
The author is David Hagan, Hagan. Just go to Amazon and type Joe Biden, and you'll see the 5 or 6 books. And look for the one that says No Ordinary Joe.
Okay, my second question, did you find in any of the information how he's going to handle the deficit?
The deficit has grown so fast and so suddenly, I don't know if there's an official position on that. This COVID situation has created a financial situation that's come up so fast and so heavy. I don't know if we have good takes on the political positions of everybody right now.
Okay. And then my third question real quick, do you see any relationship with Bernie Sanders that would concern you about his moderate position?
I'm sure Joe has talked to Bernie. Bernie is a U.S. Senator, as was Joe. I'm sure Joe listens to Bernie. But I see Joe, I'm sure Joe will listen to Bernie and get his opinion and weigh into it. But it looks like Joe is very much a moderate. But he's considering, he listens to all parties, both sides. There's one more slide that's gone up here. This is a prognostic, more than a prognostic. This is where they think the election stands right now. If you go to electoral-vote.com, it looks like Joe has a pretty significant lead, if this holds, but we know politics. Things can change.
3 months out.
3 months out, I guess I'm old enough to know the political world can turn on a dime sometimes. Who knows? But right now, I'd have to say things look pretty promising for Joe to win it.
Comment on vice president choices?
I think the choice this year is more important than any year since 1944. 1944, FDR got the nomination again, but those in his inner circle, very few, knew that his heart problems were so severe that there was a pretty high probability he would not live out his term. So the vice presidential selection of Harry Truman in 1944 was probably the most significant selection. Joe seems to be in pretty good health right now, but actually considering both candidates, Trump being, 73, Joe being 77, we have to be honest and say either man could meet his maker in the next decade, and yeah, the vulnerability was there.
There was an interesting story on the CBS Sunday Morning this morning. Jill Biden was featured, and if you DVR'd it, you might want to go or check that out. She talked a lot about education and her goals with education, and a lot about what you've mentioned here, but it was a good interview.
Yeah, she is a sharp cookie, I have to say. She'll be one of the best, if not the best, educated first ladies if Joe wins it.
Hey, you know, Ron, there's something to be said about having a good night's sleep. Reagan was very good about, and he did it very routinely, taking good naps in the afternoon so he could be cognitively alive. So, you know, sometimes some healthy practices after illnesses can take you a long ways, correct?
Yep.
Ron, I had a question. What do you know? Which states? My wife and I were talking about it. It'd be interesting comparison, like which states seem to switch, like from this one you're showing us.
Okay.
From the last election, 2016, or whatever, the comparison.
Okay. The states that really carried Trump to victory were Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That had been going Democratic for about 20 years and flipped to Trump during this last election. Key states to watch,
Florida.
Florida. If Joe Biden can win Florida, it's all over. I don't think Biden's favorable polling in Texas will hold up, but who knows? That would be the biggest shock of all, is if Texas went Democratic. But I think the race is going to be decided by what happens in Florida, Arizona, even Wisconsin. Yeah. And right now, it looks pretty good. It looks exceptionally good for Joe right now.
Okay, everybody, we are a little bit over time. Ron, if that's okay, we're going to wrap up.
That's fine.
Thank you so much for a good presentation. We learned a lot. I will lead this in 2 weeks on Trump, and if anybody has suggestions on exactly what to cover, please let me know. I'm looking forward to doing a little bit of biography, and then also the positive and negative comments about him, how people see him today, and how evangelicals are supporting him. I want to learn a little more about that myself. So that'll be in 2 weeks, but next week we'd like to do a little COVID update. Gene Dawson suggested wisely that we can share a little about how we are coping, mask and going places and gatherings and concerns, and good time for an update. So we'll do that next week. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you, Ron. Good presentation.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron. That was really good.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you stick on there for a minute, love to know have you read anything what were some of the deciding things to switch those key states, Florida, Wisconsin? Do you have any information? What are
What's flipped?